Hey, welcome to Coffee with the Curator. We're in summer mode now, so I'm in a t-shirt, right? And everybody's kind of laid back, and we're just enjoying some summer weather. So, Coffee with the Curator is brought to you by the Patchogue Arts Council and the Pat Med Library, who partners with us on many things, including, if you can see here, this great cup that I got as a gift that was made in the library's makerspace. Right, so keep that in mind. We have a great library in Patchogue.
Who made that?
Who made that cup? I recognize the artwork, and it's and Isabella made that cup. Yes, okay. So you two could make a cup of your own in the makerspace at the library. So today we're here for the exhibition that closes tomorrow. Next up, I want to just let you know a couple of other things that are happening in the near future. Next Saturday, we're going to open our patchwork show, and Deborah Katz has been during and curating that exhibit. So we'll do Coffee with Curator same time next Saturday, and then we'll be back in the gallery for the opening reception around 5 o'clock on Saturday the 17th. We also have in August the Paint the Great South Bay. So for those of you who are plein air painters, you can get out there and enjoy some time outside. You have a week to paint and bring your work in for an exhibition at the near the end of August. You can find information about that at the Patchogue Arts Council Facebook and website. And I think that's really all we have in August. In September, we get really busy. We have the vendor circus, I believe. It's
Arts on Terry?
Arts on Terry, yes. And we'll be into our next exhibition. And then we're going back to the regular programming with Learning to Look and all sorts of things happening in September. But let's enjoy the summer first, the kind of laid back pace that we can only have in the summertime. Okay, so we're at Coffee with a Curator, and this particular exhibition next up features 5 of the young people who have over the past few years lent their time and effort to the Patchogue Arts Council. We really appreciate their work. We love their vibrancy. They are, jewels to us. We love you all. And I don't mean just me, I mean all of us that work at the Arts Council. We're so happy to have young people. I think of you as like perhaps the next generation of the Art Council. There's going to be a time when we move on, and you'll probably want to come back and take this place over. Who knows? Coffee with the Curator features 5, or rather, next up features 5 artists whose works you can see on the card over here, and we're going to go to we're going to go look at their works individually in just a minute. But there were a couple of things I started to notice in looking at your work, and this is for all of the 5 of you: Isabella, Anna, Gabriela, Donna, and Eric. You can all throw in an answer if you feel like it. But what I noticed about your work, there were 2 things that came to my mind. One was that it was very personal, and that the other was that it did not offer a whole lot of positivity. I feel like perhaps it's the time that you're all working in, and you're also young that you might not know a previous time. The happy days are here again might not have been your you've all been grown in this rather tumultuous period of time. So would anybody like to comment on either of those observations?
Sure, yeah. So I'll start. So with my pieces specifically, all of them actually I've made during the pandemic, whether it was like in the beginning or like later on. So that's kind of why mine has that vibe specifically, because that's basically how I was feeling during that entire time. But I'm not sure about everyone else when they made theirs.
Okay, so they all have a sense of the pandemic in them, and Donna's pieces are number 18, 18 through 20. And is that it? Yes.
Yeah.
There should be one more that didn't make it. That isn't. Oh, I know. It's hidden behind your head on my screen. Okay. All right. So, anybody else?
I have a question actually, because
Sure.
it's something that I was thinking about during the drop off part, but I wanted to ask everybody, did everyone make their work during the 2020 COVID? Because we know Donna said yes. I'm actually that my pieces are during the quarantine, so I'm that. And I think when I was talking to Isabella, she told me as well, like they were doing that. So I don't know about Gabby or Eric if you both were doing it during the pandemic.
Mine are not. Mine are actually from like 2016 and then again from 2018. And because I've been documenting my father's progression into his disease as it's been going on. But I think, yeah, like that's a major thing in my life. So it's been always depressing.
That's these down here, which will open up larger in a moment. Anybody else want to comment? So it's depressing, Gabriela, like your work does have that. I'm not, they're beautiful too and poignant. Yes, so we'll talk about them more in a little bit. Anybody else want to share their thoughts about the time in which they made their work and and the mindset that it created for you?
With my pieces, a lot of them are actually pre-COVID. Only about like 3 or 4 of them are during it. But generally during that time, I was depressed anyway. So it just all kind of fits together.
So what is this with young people these days? You need a good music festival like Woodstock to cheer you up.
Yes.
The period of time that we were all born into idealism, that's kind of where I came from. So I hope I carry those things forward with me, and I try to share them with all of the things that I do. But it's a tough time to be young right now, isn't it? Okay, so why don't we start, Eric? Let's look at some of your work, and they're all here. So if you want to just pick on a number, get us started, and we'll talk a little bit about what drives you in these pieces. And
okay, so I guess I'll start with number 2 because that's one of the earlier pieces.
And okay, let's bring it up. I'll make that.
Didn't even realize until you had mentioned it that I was doing this tangled kind of work, about 6 years prior to, excuse me, what I'm currently doing. And I guess it's just a theme that I like working with. It's complicated. There's never really an end to what problems seem to be going on. And I had fun with the monster aspect of it, and I kind of want to get back into that. It was interesting that you picked this piece because I haven't shown it in probably about 5 years. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of cool that you did that.
Well, I kind of felt like it was connected to the more recent work, and you haven't been around for a very long time. But one of the things that happens as your career goes on over time is you go back and revisit things, but you do them with a new, all of the new life that you've lived in between, right? So things that intrigue you don't go away. They keep on coming back in new disguises, which is what I think I see with these works. Yeah. Okay, so the monsters, all right? We have this one and we have this one.
Oh yes, the teeth.
Yeah.
So the story with this one is that a lot of my earlier work, I would try to remember and like do sketches of when I start falling asleep, that half awake, half asleep dream-like state. And I try to force myself out of it so that I can like make sketches. So falling asleep, I saw some monster's teeth, woke up, doodled it down, and eventually made this. And I just kind of wanted to have the viewer kind of fill in what could be around these teeth. And it's just kind of like a fun little mental exercise for the viewer.
So Eric got his degree in art history, correct?
Correct.
Correct. So when I mentioned Goya, it should ring off bells immediately. And you know how he spent so much time in that space between lucidity and you know, well, for him it was um, I don't know whether it was just anxiety, but I know he was suffering some debilitating psychological issues brought on by inner ear trouble that he had, you know. So anyway, but it's that like on the verge of, you know, on the verge of consciousness, is that's where you say you make a lot of those works. It's very interesting. Okay, so tell us about the newer works. We have a number of them here.
I feel like the newer works are a little bit more visceral, whereas the other ones were a little bit more like a dark fantasy, almost kind of like lowbrow, like fun exercise. These as I've matured within like the past 6 years, it's become more stark. It's more black and white. It's a little bit more contrasts, and also I feel like a little bit more violent. It just looks more like sinew and tissue and less, you know, fun little monster.
Fun little
if
monsters.
you want to,
Shall we get another one?
yeah. Let's see. Number 6 is one of the newer ones. I like this one because I was able to put a little bit more detail into them.
Yeah,
With like
the capillary like action, the veins and stuff around it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make it a little bit more biological. That one was made during COVID, so it's kind of reflecting the, you know, the state that the world is in with disease and thinking about health and stuff like that. So a lot of these are just kind of like tumors or abscesses, just unpleasant things that you can't really stop looking at and trying to find a beginning or an end, and it doesn't really have one.
Yeah, it doesn't have a beginning and an end. And then I also noticed that they have like, you know, you would think that if a biological organism was creating this thing, it would be more efficient. Like there's passages that kind of go around in circles, and they have a lot of extraneous movement in them, you know. So it feels like, you know, there's a kind of intentionality that comes with you know, the various systems within our body, right? But you know, there's a biological sense that comes in the capillaries and the branching and all of that. But I don't see that in these pieces. They seem to be like, you know, as if they got kind of knocked out of their proper growth pattern or something, and you call them tumors, right?
Exactly.
Interesting. Interesting. So some of these you've exhibited horizontally and some vertically, right?
Yeah, that's one of the fun things about them is that they don't really have a correct orientation. So you can look at them from any direction, like, and the overall shape will change with it. So you'll see different things. Like I have sketches of other ones that look pretty ovarian. If you go to number 8, if you look at it, it looks rather phallic as an overall shape, and that's totally unintentional. Like that's just how it ended up being, and that's all due to the orientation.
Yeah. So there's this figure that was once created, I think, by a mathematician, and it's a three-dimensional object that, you know, has a bulbous shape and 2 branches that come up, and the branches branch continually, infinitely, as they get closer and closer together. And he used the term monster. I wish I could remember the name of it, but it's like a monstrosity because it just doesn't feel like it, you know, could actually be a thing. Well, you know, we'll have an opportunity to talk more to Eric, but I don't want everybody to sit there and get cold. So we'll come back. But before we do, you know, so I'd like to go on. And what I found very interesting in placing is that these networks that Eric uses sort of reminded me of the networks that we see in Anna's works. They're more geometric, but they have this linear network quality about them. So we'll look at some of Anna's works. You want to tell us what you're doing with these, Anna? And we'll pick,
Sure. Yeah.
Which one would you like to start with?
We can go, I think if you keep scrolling down,
Yeah.
like the one that's the print itself. Keep going down.
That's
17.
17.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So this is basically the essence of all the works. So the start of the project was I was still doing my master's at Queens College, and it's a class that focused on community and education. So within that class, we were kind of asked to figure out what community is. And so when we were tasked to do that, you know, COVID happened and we were all quarantined. And then a lot of hate crimes started to happen. So in our task, we were tasked again, like I said, to figure out what community is. And so for me, all the works are based off of Patchogue. And I had to research about Patchogue. So, and I've lived here, I would say about 23 years, and I never really did like an analytical research on Patchogue. And so what you see here now, it's actually the first map of Patchogue during like the 1800s. So what you see on the right side, which is basically the beginning roads of Patchogue, but if you were to see it on the left, those zigzag lines are the representation of water. So learning about Patchogue, and especially knowing the history of Long Island, how it was all based from Native Americans and the meaning behind Patchogue, I definitely thought that there was something really kind of really hard to really understand and break down Patchogue, but also very interesting. So Patchogue, we know how we spell it. We spell it as Patchogue. The Native American way is Pochauge. And that meaning is where two streams separate. So I felt a lot of that was connected towards me and also a Patchogue, because at a time I only known Patchogue as a very quiet, calm, very deserted town. And it's completely different to see it now booming with so many things. And it's great to see that, because before it was just very, very barren. So where you see the like MoCA or the artist colony, like I remember that as just a really large parking lot. And I bet no one can like remember that. Or it also used to be a skate park, like for a couple months, but it was a lot of different things. And to see Patchogue grow, that definitely kind of impacted it. So if we were, John, to go to number, we could do 14. So 14, I am using wood blocks. So the wood block I do is focusing on printmaking. So what I did was I basically carved out the map, and I was trying to define Patchogue. So what you see for most of the works are actually pictures of prints that eventually become a progression, but the last piece is basically the end piece of the print. So what you saw in the beginning, which was number 17, is actually now no longer that. It's actually you're going to see the drawings of it. So I took like certain motif of Patchogue and placed that in that print.
So it doesn't exist anymore because you used the same block and you reworked the block? Is that what happened?
So with the print, I can have multiple editions. So that's what, in terms of that, can happen. But the block is just my matrix. Like that is only my stamp portion. But the print is what is no longer there. So it's the paper version that is now different.
Okay, so the matrix is what the surface that you're actually printing from.
Yes.
And that doesn't change, but you do things to the print afterwards.
Yes.
Okay, so once the print is created, it can have a life of its own after And I think we noticed that on this one.
Yes. So this one it's a funny one because I remember I was taking a painting class and I had ripped a canvas, and I had only done it like a little bit, but I remember that professor was telling me, like, if you rip something, you have to make sure it's powerful. It can't be tiny. Because at that time I just did like a tiny like rip. And I'm like, okay, so how do I make this piece different than the rest? So this piece is actually based on the hate crimes that was happening, you know, in the United States. And I thought about Patchogue. So I remember 2008, Marcelo Lucero, who was an Ecuadorian immigrant, was coming home from work one night, and he was attacked by three teenagers. So like 16, 17-year-olds, like in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And to tell you the truth, I am within walking distance of the railroad. So to see that happen was such a huge like discomfort, uncertainty, because I'm Hispanic and my family, we speak Spanish. And so there are moments where I am speaking in public in Spanish and I have to take myself out of that context and say, oh my goodness, will I get hurt if I'm speaking this other language because of everything that's been happening? So the way I approached this print was, yes, this print was Patchogue, but how can I describe the essence of the tension that was going on in Patchogue with these hate crimes and all over the world? Like, how do I express that? And so I guess what really was the powerful moment was to see it burn. And I think the moment that the whole print was burned, it's like, what happens next? You know, and I felt like it's very different from the other pieces for sure, because you have like this clear white background. And Eric was saying it too, like the contrast, like this is such a huge contrast with everything else. Like this is just there and you're questioning it. So I felt like this piece was the kind of like the essence of what I was trying to talk about with Patchogue.
So, you know, and 2008, you were just a little one, right?
Yes.
Right. It was a terrible time in Patchogue. It was a terrible thing that happened here. But to defend Patchogue, it was people who didn't live in Patchogue who committed the heinous crime. And it helped galvanize our community to become the place where hopefully you don't have to be afraid anymore. You know, it's one of those oases you know, where the people who really wanted to work in Patchogue and make it a good place have all been working since then to try to, like, you know, to establish it as a place of peace. So we're looking at Anna's work, and it seems to be growing and disappearing, and um, it's Patchogue, but Anna is so tied into Patchogue that it's also herself, and the pieces grow and disappear, and they trace the history of Patchogue. You know, that first one. For people who don't know, this is Main Street, this is North Ocean, and this is South Ocean over here, which, you know, however long ago that was the original germ of Patchogue, and it becomes more complex as time goes on, and you can still find it in there, and there's more streets in her works. Speak about, just before we go on, speak about why some have color and why don't.
So this piece is actually the last piece of the series. So like you said, John, like Patchogue, because of that, like we wanted to do better. And that's why we see it now as the way it is. And a lot of people know it as the way it is now. So with the colors, I was basically using it in terms of people, like population wise. So what you see in the beginning on the left is just the beginning of Patchogue. And then in the middle, we're slowly starting to grow. And then the last one, which is also on number 15, that is basically the print or the final version of it. But basically the red is significant, like in terms of like the amount of people that we see, like where is the most populated place, yellow as well, and blue is like the calmest area. So that's why I was playing around with those colors. I felt like a lot of times, like we already like know it in terms of like topographical maps. Like there's certain reds and yellows and greens. And this one, I wanted to play around with those same aspects as well.
Oh, very good. Very interesting. So that idea of emergence and disappearing was one of the things that struck me when I was looking at Donna's works. So from 18 to 21 are Donna's works, and you don't have to say much about this one, but someone seems to be looking in here, Donna.
Yes, yeah.
You know, and I felt like with, you know, this piece is the most figurative of all of the pieces that we have in here. And it's sort of like sets, you know, gives everybody a clue as to what they're looking at when they're looking at the other pieces. So you want to talk about them?
Yeah, sure. So this painting in particular, it's actually part of a triptych, but I only wanted to include this particular painting because I didn't want to take away from it. I wanted it to stand by itself. And kind of what's happening here is that the viewer doesn't know whether or not the person is like pulling the shower curtain over themselves or trying to get out. And that's kind of like the juxtaposition of what I wanted to communicate here with like breaking free, but also like being stuck behind something. But the thing that's obstructing them is something like clear, but it still does distort them. And that takes place in a shower, because I think personally a shower is like a place where you can be very like comfortable and you have it like to yourself, the nice warm water, you get to like sing in there, like have your time to yourself, but also you're very vulnerable, like in the movie Psycho, like some people were actually saying that yesterday. And it's a good observation because it's a very comforting space where you have solitude, but also that solitude can bring like horror. It could be a place where you're like naked and afraid. So it's kind of like communicating like someone trying to break free of that. But yeah, it's like an interesting setting. So almost all of my pieces that are in the show are like a shower setting for that reason.
Okay, so you want to look at one of the others because the others are much less, you know, obvious into what we're looking at. Which would you like to see?
Yeah. Any of the other triptychs. Yeah, both of the triptychs.
So there's two triptychs, and they both have a range of like intensity in them. We could look at them both for a second.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad you actually put this one up first because I actually painted these first. I painted maybe like 16 or 19 gouache paintings, and then I went through them and I decided that these three in particular like looked good together, and they happened to be the first three that I did. So it reads from left to right in my mind. And the second one I actually went back and revisited. That's why it's way more opaque than the other two. I start out very transparent, trying to like give way to like the water aspect of the shower, like how everything's like translucent and runny and like steamy. But yeah, so what happens here is that the figure is kind of just like, you can kind of see the figure more here than in the other ones.
Yeah.
But they're kind of like also breaking free. It's way more abstract than the oil painting that you just showed. But the figures are kind of just like getting at, like they're kind of like trying to shed the space from themselves. They're trying to like break free, and they're kind of like pushing the curtain around. And the middle one, especially, is like an explosion of that. And you have like the two figures on the outskirts, like pushing it. Like there's a lot of tension there.
It's almost like the shower is coming out. You know?
Yeah,
exactly. The water is coming out of the shower. But, you know, it's interesting because, you know, I didn't see in the right or left of these two until we just had this discussion, how they do feel like there's a curtain in front of them now, you know?
Yeah.
I didn't see that at all either until now. And I'm like, and maybe because they're closer to my eye on the screen, I'm like amazed with how much detail I'm grabbing from these now that I'm looking at them so close to my face now.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. So like the painting, has a lot of, you know, manipulation of paint in it.
Yes. So this one's really interesting. So the inspiration for this is that it was a really like tough time. It was like the peak of the pandemic. I was still caught up in all this work for school, and I had this major final project, and I was like, what do I do? And I was like, I guess I'll just like paint how I feel. And for some reason I can just like never paint like out of my head. That doesn't happen. So I was like, all right, let me start with a picture of my room as a reference photo, because I feel like the state of my bedroom reflects the state of my mind. If it's chaos in here, it's chaos in here. So I was like, okay, we'll work with that. And the thing is, when I started painting it and drawing it out and sketching it, I was like, well, I don't want people to think of it as a painting of my bedroom, because that's not what it is. I want it to be a painting of like what's going on in my mind right now. I want to communicate that to people. How do I do that? So I kind of just started like throwing paint on the canvas, like painting with my hands and like anything but a paintbrush. And then I went back in there and touched things up with a paintbrush. And I kind of like, I definitely lost the bedroom. You can never see it. It's not there. That's fine. But the energy of how I felt at that time is very much present. I wanted it to be a very like physical painting for both. It was a physical painting for me, just getting like really into it with the canvas. But like for the viewer as well, the amount of texture and energy that I have going on is something that I've never really been able to achieve prior to this painting.
And so I'm not sure whether these were made afterwards, maybe not. And again, looking at them now with what you've said, you know, how tying together the shower is here, especially in the work in the left, which is the one that has the most limited palette in it.
Mm-hmm.
But the colors seem to explode here now.
Yeah, these came afterwards. And with this triptych in particular, I have it set up from left to right, where the figure kind of dissolves. So in the first one's like, okay, like the figure's like sidestepping, like trying to push away. Like it's kind of like the shower curtain's like creeping up on them, but they're trying to break that. The second one, the space is dissolving. And the third one, like everything is dissolving. So in this particular series, it becomes less about the physical space and the confines of the shower and more about the figure itself. And at the end, the figure kind of dissolves entirely anyways, but this is more about the figure and their journey rather than what the shower space means. So this is more about like what's going on in their head space and how like they're moving through that than about being like trapped in the space of the shower. Like they're breaking free of that and this is what's happening.
Well, thank you. So you know, when I look at the middle one, the only thing that really anchored it as a figure for me were those hands reaching out. And you know, as we look past Donna's works to Isabella's works, this is, sorry, it's a little bit crooked here. This was the first one that you would come to after looking at Donna's work. So Isabella, we have here, we'll look at all of your work in a moment, but this one is very cryptic, and I felt like that kind of carried over the energy in Donna's works. But would you like to tell us what you were trying to do with this painting?
Yeah, so this painting is actually a painting of a sculpture I made. And the sculpture is kind of very bright and colorful. And I wanted to kind of place it in a darker setting. And when I was doing that, I was thinking of like shadows and silhouettes and how things look very different in the dark and you can't tell what things are. So actually I have a picture of the sculpture. I can show you on the camera.
Oh, okay.
And basically thinking about like how things look different in the dark, how there's assumption of things of objects, kind of placing an object in a dark setting and making it darker, having the audience kind of think themselves what they like it to be or what they see. I heard I think you said tunnel, someone else said this was a cave, someone thought of Wall-E, like the robot from Disney.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that's also the reason why it's untitled. I just wanted kind of people to get like their own ideas of what this could be.
It's very interesting how the message changes from that cute little thing that you showed us, you just held up, to this over here. It feels like, there's a knife impaling, this figure here, and it's like, it's reaching out and all, and it's a very disquieting image. But one of the things that Isabella mentioned, how she made a painting based on a sculpture, and what I have next for us to look at is another set of works that she did, all based on the same thing, and you move through many mediums in making this.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about, I'm thinking of this as a suite. They're all individual things, but they all come from the same source.
Yes.
As
so
well
started,
as
oh yeah.
this, which I'm so happy to own. Thank you.
So it started with the performance in the video, and it was inspired by the pandemic. And at the point when there was toilet paper shortages and a buying frenzy, there was, I feel like, a certain madness that was also amplified through the media with people buying and like just consuming the consumption. So in the video, you see someone approaching a box, and then they open the box and it's just this one toilet paper roll, this red roll. I kind of decided with the color red and having just this one to be almost like, oh, it's forbidden, you shouldn't touch it. The person grabs it and then is completely wrapped. It kind of switches really quickly. And I did that kind of to question, like, oh my goodness, what is happening? What, like this person's just wrapped in the toilet paper now. And this, behind that, the meaning is really thinking about, instead of the consumer consuming the product is consuming the consumer and quite literally devouring them whole. That's what I call the video, Devoured.
Nice turn of phrase. Very good.
Yes.
And then of course, the ultimate demise.
And then just, yeah, falling over, kind of just like that it completely devoured, right? And also overwhelmed the person with so much of, like, I think the anxiety of what was going on, and like the people buying so much and everyone also fighting over things that, we don't necessarily fight about. I mean, it's this toilet paper. So, and then it led to, I guess, it devoured me, myself, into creating more into this piece in a series. And I made the painting.
Sorry. The painting?
Yes, and it's called Consuming. And I painted myself. The performance is myself, and I painted myself. Just kind of, I guess I was so much focused on the video and thinking about everything that was going on that I kept wanting to like recreate it. And a lot of my work is really like the exploration of identity and the way society expresses itself and my own experiences. So I guess my own thoughts came with this painting more itself, with everything going on and the anxiety.
Mm. So we were treated yesterday to a live performance, and I have a couple of stills from it here. So other people were taking the video. So I'm assuming that you can find the video on the Patchogue Arts Council Facebook page. I haven't looked yet, but so this was near the beginning, not quite the beginning, right? As we look here, what you want to narrate, and then if you notice, I have a few other images below over here. Right,
of course.
Sure.
So this performance is called Self-Love, and I have two buckets. One that says self, and it has paint, and the other one says love, and it has confetti. And actually, this was my first live performance that I've created. And it was very much an introduction to the art world. This was like my first art piece, actually. And it was I made it during a time where I was struggling myself with self-love. And I don't know, it definitely broke that. I feel so much better, but doing the performance and sharing that with people and being vulnerable, I love the connection that I have between others and the performance and how they view it and how it's quiet, because I don't speak during it. I kind of just like perform. I pour the self, I pour the love, and then I spread it all over, and then it's again back to silence.
Yeah. So I was in the audience, obviously taking these pictures, and I was like, there's like half the people in there had cameras, and it was like, gee, you are really under a microscope when you're doing this. It's like, I was like, okay, it would be one thing if if you were doing this and there was some kind of, they use the term proscenium in theater to separate the audience from the actors, and or the fourth wall sometimes. But in this, there were like dozens of people taking your picture from just like 10 feet away. It was kind of like I almost didn't want to participate in that. It seemed too aggressive, reaction to it. So anyway, thank you for doing this. It was really brave of you to come out and do that. So she's putting herself out there, in a very vulnerable way with this one, but sometimes she likes to hide.
Yes.
And this is the hidden Isabella, or maybe it's not you, I don't know, but
So yes, it actually is me.
Okay.
I think a lot of my works, I do incorporate myself very much often in everything I paint, everything I sculpt, everything I record. It's very much all me. But yeah, this one I love because I like the assumption people have, assuming the identity. People see it, they see a figure and they're like, oh, who's that man? Oh, it's like automatically assuming because the legs. Because those are my legs, but they're hairy legs. I didn't shave them. I painted them like that. Kind of the purpose of like assuming identity, assuming gender, the way people feel towards that. And I just, the sheet itself, so you really don't have an idea of what this is, what this figure is, or what this person is. So like people kind of like questioning.
Well, yeah, the idea of assuming gender was interesting in that the last show that we had illuminated a spotlight on gender. The experience at the opening of having all of these masked people, including myself, and all of them being, well, not all of them, but many of them being in a fluid, place in between genders. It was, you didn't get to see like who, you couldn't make a gender assumption for anybody. So you just ignored gender. It was kind of a fascinating experience. But, Isabella is shrouded here. And I felt like that was an important lead up to Gabriela's work. And this was the work that I have next to that. And this is such a beautiful image of, and it, I think immediately of the Pietà when I look at this, right?
Yeah.
So I have, I don't know, I don't want to lead your conversation about your work. These two are next to each other, and then we have the other three images. So if you want to direct us through the conversation by showing particular images,
you can go to the first one that you went to.
Start with the Pietà.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're correct. Like that's exactly what I was going for. And then when I started this project, I really was trying to understand the AIDS epidemic of which my father came from and all the past that happened in that. And, drawing the conclusion that like, my family is pretty Catholic and I grew up in that, and understanding the connection between my father and his devoutness to the Catholic Church and my family's devoutness to us, and how they've also rejected him completely. And so, I wanted to do the Pietà, the what's it called? Hold on, I have to look it up. I have it. What's the Lamentation of Christ. I really wanted to do, like, there were certain things that I really wanted to hit because it just, like, it was a coping mechanism, as like I think religion can be for a lot of people, and understanding that dynamic between all three of us and how we've had to like cope for what's happening. And then if you want to go to 35. So when I started with the project of 29 Surviving, which was in 2017, my dad had been a survivor of the AIDS diagnosis for 29 years. And throughout the 29 years, like I'm 26 now, and I wouldn't be a thing at all if they didn't go and adopt me and bring me here and do all the amazing things. And in those 29 years, they told him he was going to be dead. So it just, the relationship between all of us and the family, and it's not normal, quote unquote. And I think it's a lot more accepting now. But when I was growing up, it was a complete reversal of things that I had no idea like could be a thing. And then the one in the middle was taken out of the original thought between like diving so heavily into like religious like paintings and stuff like that. And the crown he's wearing is all the medicine that he takes. So it's each pill that I placed on there, and each tattoo on each side of him is my name and my other father's name. So just kind of having like a Christ picture, but in his own way of what he is, like Christ in my family. And yeah, it's just my family. Going through and documenting all that.
Here.
Yeah, but it's really weird because like I haven't like thought about this in a very long time, and since the pandemic things have gotten like so much worse, and like I'm very grateful for the situation that the pandemic kind of gave me, because it gave me so much time with him. But like looking at these now, I'm like, oh my God. It's crazy how much time changes. But
oh, you mean your visage over the years?
yeah. Someone told
Mm-hmm.
me and told my father last night, they were like, your father looks so much younger, you look so much older. I was like, thank you.
You look a little bit more worried in this picture than you do now. So hopefully that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So why did you choose to depict the Pietà as the image here? You know, so I mean, the story of the Pietà is the grieving afterwards.
Yeah.
You know, so.
And that was kind of my, dealing with the situation itself and like taking like actual like focus on it. I think most of the time, because I'm living in it, I don't like have a chance to really understand the situation at hand. And this really made me come to terms with the inevitable and my feelings on it, and how harsh it's been growing up with. It's always been a like cloud that's been there saying like, this is going to happen at some point. And it helped me like go through that process of it, and also understand the dynamic of why I'm so crazy, like understanding religion and why that's like a thing. But and the attachment there. But I think, the like for my family, at least because they're so Italian, they are engraved in the Catholic nature, and that's their only way to understand it. And the Pietà was just the exact moment where we're going to have to deal with this at some point. It's been there and it's going to end.
So you said your father, this father, was rejected by his family. I
Yeah.
spoke to your other father yesterday, and it was amazing how we were able to like connect on the history that we both existed in growing up on Long Island, you know. But what I'm curious about here is, like, you say your family was steeped in Catholicism, but how did they feel to how did your fathers react to the rejection that comes from Catholicism for their lifestyle?
Yeah. And I think that's that was my whole process of trying to like do these pictures and like understanding why, like, you've been so turned away from the Catholic Church your entire life, but it's so engraved in their nature. And I think that's something that like I don't have a connection to. And I think it's just also our generation. I don't have that same conversation that they had. And, I'm on my phone all the time. I'm going places all the time. And they were just, going to church. And they're, for them, it's something they couldn't let go of, even though it's, disgusting what they do and say to people like them, but you know, it's engraved in the soul and in the memory and in my grandparents and everyone else.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that. Well, you know, we'd like to take questions if anybody has questions for any of these great artists that we're exhibiting. I don't know whether we did forget to announce that we would take questions at the beginning, but if anybody has any, you could type them into the chat box. Beth can read them to us and we can go on. I just want to point out one thing while we are waiting for whatever questions we get, that Donna's work, more of Donna's work is now available. You want to tell us where, Donna?
Yes, so I actually have a show up for the entire month of July over at Great Self Bar in Patchogue. It's actually right around the corner from the gallery. And yeah, so there's a reception this Sunday from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. And aside from that, it'll be hanging the entire month.
Well, that's great. That's great. Okay, do we have any questions?
Not yet. I am just searching through Facebook to check for anything.
Okay, okay. Before we answer any of those questions, I do also want to point out something that I didn't mention at the beginning. The next Sunday when we do the patchwork exhibit, we're also going to be recognizing the artist in the sculpture garden. And so that is halfway between our gallery and Donna's show. And we'll be doing that on next Saturday. And if you go to that, you know, come to the gallery, you can turn around and look back at the library, our partners over there, and see the mural that's going up. You know, it's really exciting to see the coming of age. Coming of age is the theme of this year's 2021 PAC theme. So yes, we have that. Excuse me. Excuse me. Sorry. So yeah, so do we have any questions? Do you have questions for each other? Anybody?
No questions from Facebook yet.
No questions from Facebook. We didn't invite ourselves for questions yet. So
I typed it.
Yeah, that interruption was the library mural in process. So I'm supposed to go and meet the artist there in a couple of minutes. Okay, so no questions for each other?
I have one.
Eric, hey, thank you.
Perfect.
What's
up? This question is for Donna. I actually got to see the show over at Great South Bar, and I really like the piece that has like all of the different views of drapery, which kind of goes with the shower that you're talking about. Is there a reason why you like painting the drapery for any particular reason?
Yeah, I feel like there's so much emotion to be depicted in fabrics and drapery. Like there's like a sensuality to it. It could either be like vulgar, erotic, like intimidating, comforting, and in some of the drapery, and it was not intentional, some of them are very phallic and other ones like actually look like vaginas, and that wasn't even intended to be like that. But yeah, and even like learning in art history, going back and all the ways I did like drapery and clothing and everything that it meant, and like how the body of it like depicted like what that person felt or who they were. So I just made these paintings like just the drapery, and I picked like certain colors and certain ways that they would like bend and everything, and just like whatever happened. So yeah, I use that as a different way to like convey emotion without being like in your face about it.
That's funny. I when I was a young artist, I was fascinated in drawing drapery too, and I think it was a whole different reason. I just liked the way that, you know, you went from front, you know, you saw the inside, the outside, the inside, the outside as it rippled along, and I'm still doing it now. You know? So it's pretty interesting. Okay, well,
questions.
Yeah.
They're both for Isabella. One she may have answered, but someone may have missed the answer. So the first question is why you chose red toilet paper. And the second question is, do you have any other work that you've done that's video related, like Devoured? And if you do, maybe you can tell everybody where to see it.
Yeah, so I picked the red toilet paper. I did mention it before, but it was like related to COVID, in a sense where it's like the forbidden roll, a type of like red is very much such a attracting color, and having this like alertness to it's like warning, you know, to have it in the box and the person touch it and have them completely wrapped in it, having that contrast. That's why I chose the red. And actually funny, there's when I was looking for different toilet paper colors, there's so many colors and I was so surprised to see them. It was very random, but there's lots of colors that exist, I guess, for toilet paper, which is so funny.
All of those are for putting on trees, by the way.
Yeah, right.
Decorating trees.
And then, yes, I have other videos like devoured, and I have other ones actually that I'm starting to develop, but you can probably find it all on my website. It's just isabellafrenanda.com.
Great. And Isabella will be actually working with us to create an animation, a stop motion clay animation workshop. So you guys can keep an eye out for that.
Yes.
Good. Well, you know, it is noon on a Saturday in the summertime. So thank you all for being here with us. Thank the artists for sharing this time and their thoughts on their work and their work. It's very fascinating, and your time over the years. I've you know come to really appreciate my relationship to each one of you. So thank you so much. Thank you, Beth.
All. We love you.
Back there. Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
We're gonna sign off
Thank
now.
you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
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 Bye, guys.
Guys.
Bye, Anna.